welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 33, where we're talking about a game of poker chip gladiatorial combat that, for whatever reason, does not star Russell Crowe, Hoplomachus Origins. But we will get to that in just a little bit. As always, we're going to start with the news. Our first bit of news for this week is that Adam and Brady Sadler with Blacklist Games have started a Kickstarter for Alter Quest, which is a game for 1 to 4 players that very clearly draws its inspiration from Hero Quest. And if you've played Hero Quest before, which I have not.
And I have.
Yeah, it's a really rad-looking dungeon crawler with a set board and really cool furniture pieces.
Right.
So if you are looking for a dungeon crawler that features lots of furniture, this looks like a pretty cool successor to that.
It does make me sad that I won't get to be Zargon, though.
Yeah, Zargon is really cool, but there are gargoyles.
Right, that's true.
Yeah. One of the coolest things about this that is not a part of the original Hero Quest is that this has a built-in solo mode. And not just a solo mode, but a solo mode that features true solo play. Meaning you don't have to control multiple characters the way you typically do in a dungeon crawl. You can just control one, which is so sweet. It's a really neat looking game, beautiful components and artwork. It features the same modular deck system that the Sadler brothers have had in Street Masters and Brook City, only with some new innovations. So if you're at all interested in that and are looking for a cool solo dungeon crawl, check out Alter Quest from Blacklist Games. Our second bit of news for this week is that Button Shy Games, which makes some really popular 18-card small solo-friendly games, has a new title coming out on Kickstarter called Tussie Mussy, which makes me feel silly saying it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably pronounced a different way, right?
It probably wouldn't sound any better, though.
Yeah, probably not. What's cool about this, apart from it being from Button Shy Games, is that it's a game about flowers, which there aren't many of those out there, and it's from artist Beth Sobel and designer Elizabeth Hargrave, who did Wingspan. And that's really cool because Elizabeth Hargrave has obviously proven herself to be a very gifted designer, and I'm just excited to see what else she comes up with. And these games always look really cool. Sprawlopolis in particular is one that a lot of people love to play solo. So if you are at all interested in a very small footprint solo game, check out Tussie Mussy on Kickstarter right now. Another new title that was announced this week from Modifius Games is Elder Scrolls Call to Arms. This is interesting because it's a tabletop miniatures game, and it's from the same company that brought us the Fallout miniatures game, not to be confused with the Fallout board game from Fantasy Flight. And this is a miniatures game that features solo play. What is interesting to me, though, is that the Fallout license sort of makes sense. I don't know. It just doesn't strike me as a very distinct and interesting world to set a miniatures game in.
Yeah. It seems just like the theme because it's a well-known theme in IP.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are very excited about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a very good game. I didn't play Fallout Wasteland Warfare just because it's so expensive. But it does look neat. The miniatures are nice. And it looks like you can expect this sometime around December 2019 with some promotional figure available at Gen Con for those who are interested in that. So that is Elder Scrolls Call to Arms, which is a solo tabletop miniatures game. Our last title that we're talking about this week is Etherfields from Awaken Realms. Awaken Realms, of course, is known for their big box Kickstarter games and their huge campaigns. They just finished one up for Tainted Grail, which is like a grim version of Arthurian legend. That looked pretty interesting. If you're interested in that same sort of exploration type feel, then maybe Etherfields is for you. This is a dream crawler. They're insisting on calling it that, which feels a little bit forced to me, but it's still interesting. You're exploring some kind of a dreamscape world. It features logic and deduction and exploration, and also requires you to rely on your emotional intelligence, according to the description. I don't know how that works mechanically, but I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
They could pull it off. What's really neat to me about this, apart from the publisher, is that it's being designed by Mikhail Oras. I don't know how to pronounce it. The guy who designed this War of Mine, Neuroshima Hex, The Edge Dawnfall, really big games. He's apparently come up with the story for this one. And given the hype that this War of Mine got over its story, that sounds like a pretty cool idea for a game. So if you're interested in checking this out, this is coming to Kickstarter sometime in Q3 of this year, and that is Aetherfields from Awakened Realms. Our last bit of news for this week is that the Spiel des Jahres and Kinderspiel award nominations have been announced. And if you're not familiar with those awards, these are basically the biggest awards in board gaming, period. They are given every year to games that have appeared in print in German. And so sometimes that throws off the release date. Stuff doesn't always make sense with the year the awards are given, but it has a lot to do with whether it appeared in Germany in a given year. Most of the games that are nominated this year are not solo friendly, especially on the Spiel des Jahres side, but there are 2 Kinderspiel nominees that are. One of them is Detective from Portal Games, which is a game about solving different crimes using the internet and other resources that are kind of non-traditional for board games. It looks really cool. And Wingspan from Elizabeth Hargrave. So very, very cool to see Wingspan get this nomination. Congratulations to Elizabeth Hargrave. I mean, a first-time designer getting this nomination is insane.
Yeah.
So very cool. Congratulations to her and to the Stonemaier Games family. We'll find out who won those in a couple of months, but for now, those are the folks who have been nominated. And that's all we've got for the news for this episode, so we're just going to get right into our review. And our review for this episode is Hoplomachus Origins. Hoplomachus comes to us from designers Josh and Adam Carlson at Ship Theory Games. It came out in 2015, and it's a game for 1 to 2 players. Hoplomachus Origins is a game of arena combat, like gladiatorial-style combat, set in 3 ancient mythological civilizations. You're going to draft a small band of fighters each round, and you're going to compete against a real opponent if you're playing multiplayer, or an AI opponent if you're playing solo, to complete different map-based objectives or wipe out the other player. And you're basically in a solo game attempting to complete a set of 20 solo trials. And that is what's going on in this game. We'll just start where we always start, by talking about the components for this game.
I really like the components in this game. The big heavy chips feel so good. The big neoprene mats are just, I mean, I say big, they're reasonably sized.
Yeah, but they're pretty small.
They're nice to use the chips on. I don't know. I mean, the art is well made, or well drawn and composed, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, there are a few art pieces that look a little bit muddy and kind of weird to me, but those are the exception. We've reviewed one other game from Chip Theory, Triplock, on this show, and I've been very impressed with all their components. I mean, Triplock we had some mixed feelings on because we didn't really like the memory element of the game and that sort of thing, but component-wise, it was mostly really good. The same is true here. The chips feel amazing to use.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I really like is your different fighters are represented by these thick, heavy chips that have printed on their face, all the different stats and special abilities that you'll need, along with a picture of your fighter. And then the health for this unit is represented by a stack of chips underneath it. And so that means when you're moving a big, heavy unit, you're picking them up off this neoprene mat, which feels great, and you're sliding them over. And it just, there's such a cool tactile experience that happens when you slide a big stack of poker chips across neoprene.
I know, and it slides so well.
Yeah. It's like they understand what separates a board game experience from playing a video game.
Mm-hmm.
They get that it is the tactile experience. And miniatures are cool, but they don't necessarily feel good to move around the board.
Right. And also, they can be kind of bland.
Yeah, they can be kind of
because
bland.
A lot of people don't paint their minis.
Yeah, that's right. And these feel like really high quality components, but you don't have to paint them or prep them in any way. And they're much easier to store and set up.
Yes.
I mean, this is a standard kind of ticket to ride size box. Everything fits in the insert here with plenty of room to spare. So if you wanted to add some of the small upgradable components that they have on their website, you can do that. There's plenty of room. And what I also love about all these components is when it's time to play a game, it has a very small footprint on your table.
Mm-hmm.
It sets up in 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the game itself, which we'll talk about a little bit later, plays in 10 minutes.
Yes.
10 to 15 per round. And when you're ready to pack it up, I mean, the whole experience is so quick.
Yep. Setup, breakdown. I mean, couldn't take any less time. And then just playing the game has just a nice, quick pace. And 15 minutes tops, I would say.
Yeah. Very few components to deal with, but they're very high quality. So for me, very high marks on the components, which, to be fair, Chip Theory Games is known for.
Yes.
I mean, they don't go through distributors. So if you're interested in this game, you have to buy it from their website unless you want to get a secondhand copy somewhere. But that gives them a little bit more freedom to do what they want component-wise. And man, it really shows here in this production. And that leads us then to the rules for the game. And the rules, one of the nice things about this is that they are short and there's not much rules overhead, especially for solo play. The solo rules are really short and make sense in the context of the other multiplayer rules. Changes very few things. It's very clear to me that it was designed with solo play in mind from the beginning.
What makes you think that it was designed with solo play from the beginning? Because, I mean, I think solo play works really well in this game, but I was just wondering if there's anything in particular.
Just that there are so few changes to the core multiplayer rules, I think. I mean, one of the things that kept me away from this game for a while is trying to figure out how a solo gladiatorial experience would work. I mean, I like arena combat games just fine, but I just imagine them having a lot of rules overhead. It seems to me like they designed the abilities and the stats in a way that they would work easily solo or multiplayer.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a company that is known for creating very fleshed out solo modes for their games.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I could see that totally.
Yeah. The rules for solo are pretty simple. The only issue that we had is the rules aren't always as clear as you'd like them to be.
Yeah, I would say the rules, they're easy to understand and they feel well explained, but it is one of those things that once I started playing my first game, and even probably really my second game too, I was very insecure moving through it because I realized I don't really understand this, and I would have to look back at the rules, and they weren't 100% clear, but it was just kind of going off of intuition, and it's nice to have, I guess, really feeling like, this is exactly what the rules are supposed to be. Yeah,
I agree with that. One specific example that I can think of is in the first mission that you play, the first trial, one of the AI characters has the ability to heave you off of a platform and onto the ground, which is a really cool idea, except that heave is not specifically mentioned in the rulebook anywhere that I could find.
And the language it uses when it says that it heaves you is definitely vague enough to where I had no idea what it was talking about.
Yeah, I agree. And I looked it up on Board Game Geek, and I found out it does basically what I thought it meant. But I just wish that it had been spelled out a little bit more in the rules. The other thing I would mention is one of the things that makes this game cool is that all the different units have special abilities and keywords on them. But that does mean at the beginning when you start playing this, you'll find yourself looking at all the keywords to find out exactly what they do. And I feel like I understood what they were pretty quickly.
Yeah, all the other keywords, even if with all the keywords, even if I didn't know what it meant, it thematically made sense or understood it, and it was easy to remember.
Yeah, I feel that way too. There's just a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, trying to get your head around the specifics of what those things mean, but they're just not overcomplicated either. Overall, I would say the rules are very well done, and especially the solo rules and the game mode that exists for solo is cool, but we'll talk about that just a little bit more. As for the play of the game, I was not sure exactly what to expect when I came into this. I knew gladiatorial combat, it works pretty much what you would expect for a game about warriors moving around a grid in one sense. I mean, that they're going to have a movement score on them. They're going to be able to hit for so much damage. They'll be able to defend so much. There's a basic foundation for these kind of games that exists out there, and it's present in this game. What's really neat about it is, on each of these different chips that represent warriors, you have different stats, like their health and how far they can move and all that. What's a little bit different here is that at the beginning of any given match, you're basically building your little pool of warriors. You're drafting them from all the chips that are in the game, minus, one or two factions that are present here. And you're basically sort of deck building almost. A significant element of this game is prepping which warriors you want to bring into a battle to play. And what makes that interesting is that each of the trials that you're going to play through in the solo mode have a different sort of objective to them, depending on what map you're on. I mean, you can almost always just kill everybody else on the opposing side,
Right.
but you're often outnumbered.
Right.
So that's not usually the best way to go. There's some objective-based play depending on which map you're in. And so drafting which fighters you want to use, you draft for the situation that you're facing.
Yes.
And that to me is so cool.
It is really cool. And I mean, I found with some games that it was like, okay, well, maybe this will work. And then I try it against this certain situation for this trial that I was playing. And I drafted poorly. Like the combinations of gladiators, champions, heroes, whatever they're called, and tactics I use was not a good fit and not very effective. And just seeing like, okay, well, this was my problem. How can I compensate for that? And kind of drafting a second batch was just, I don't know, it was very nice. And it just didn't really feel that bad because the games are so short. Especially if I planned poorly, then they were extra short.
Yeah, right. That's so true. One of the nice things about this is I say deck building and like building your squad or whatever to take into this round. And I feel like that could sound like that takes a while. But there really aren't that many components in this game. So even though all the different units are pretty different from one another and have very specific things that they're good at, it doesn't take that long to sift through them to see what you want to bring in for a particular battle. It's not overwhelming in terms of the number of keywords that you're looking at any one time because it's such a small map and such a small squad of people that you're bringing. That part still goes pretty quickly. I mean, maybe takes you 5 to 10 minutes to decide who you want to bring with you. But there's a lot of significant decisions there.
Oh, yeah.
Not only because you're trying to think, okay, what basic warrior units do I want to bring that I can use to counter some of the things I'm going to run into in this particular situation, but also you're limited in the number of champions that you can bring in, which have some really cool special abilities. So you want to think about which champion would complement the warriors that you have and complements the rules of that particular map that you've got. And also you're considering the units that your enemy's bringing, which you know right up front. Like, what special abilities do they have? How can I counter those? And then at the same time, there are these other chips that you can draft in addition to warriors and champions that are tactics. And the tactics are things, basically buffs that you can give your characters or debuffs that you can put on somebody else. All of that sounds like a lot, but it happens very quickly, and yet it's very decision rich.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the more you play through it, you really kind of have that general kind of intuitive familiarity of what the different factions can do, or just kind of remembering pretty quickly how a unit works and how that would work with whatever combination, and just experimenting with that.
Yeah, the game comes with 5 different factions that you get to draft from, but on any given map, you're only drafting 6 chips total.
Right.
And what's really interesting about that is it's up to you how much of that pool is warriors or tactics or champions, although the champions are limited in how many you can get.
Right.
But that feels really cool. That freedom, if you want, you can bring in just a couple of units and buff them way up, or debuff your opponents quite a bit and focus on that if you want to. It's so nice because they just find the perfect balance between the freedom to build your squad how you want to. You can even mix and match different units from these factions, even though units from the same faction do tend to kind of work well together. Sometimes a situation calls for mixing them, having the freedom to draft what you want, but also having such a small pool to pick from that it makes it manageable while making it also tense.
Yes.
Because you're never going to be able to draft everything you want to deal with the situation.
Right.
It feels economic that way, and like an old school Euro game. And I really like that a lot.
Yeah, I would say just choosing 6 is just a good number. I mean, most of the scenarios you're choosing at least 6. And yeah, it's a good balance of, you feel like you have enough options and flexibility with your choice, but it's not too much.
Yeah, that's really nice. And it's also nice too that when you're playing through the solo trials, basically what you're doing is you have a set of 20 different scenarios you're trying to play through, and they get progressively harder. That's cool that that ramps up the difficulty as you go. It's also cool that if you fail one of the trials, you have one more chance to defeat it before you slide back to the rung below it on the ladder. But the part that I like the best is if you try to just use one squad that works really well for you and continue using it throughout the game. Basically, there's an element of these kind of drafting pool building games where you can get stuck if you find one combo that you feel like works really well. Mm-hmm. This game doesn't let you do that. Not only because the maps and the different scenarios change so dramatically from game to game, but also because on each of these different scenarios that you're playing through, you have, or the trials that you're playing through, you have different restrictions in what you can draft that particular round. It forces you to be creative.
It's just like a little, I mean, I guess it's not a puzzle to solve, but in a sense, it's like, okay, what's the best approach for this situation? And you try it and you might fail, or you might be like, oh, this is a good combination.
Yeah. Even if it fails, you still are only playing a match that lasts, 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so apart from actually building your team, playing with the ones that you drafted feels really good as well. And that's partly because there's just a really tight rule set here for how you move your characters around, how attacking works and all that. The fact that it is deterministic on your side means that the game is less about luck on your part and more about trying to think through what your opponents are going to do, where they're going to be, how you can not get into like a bad bottleneck situation, and how you can use the map to your advantage. Like all that for me works really well. I love the mixture of map-based objectives for winning a match versus just combat.
Absolutely.
The combat feels like a way of managing your opponents more than just the focus of the game.
Yeah, and the champions on the other side, or champion, they'll have dice rolled for them. And so that is like this kind of unpredictable chance-based thing of not knowing how they're going to act, but the other units act normally. And it's just a good balance of having a pretty good idea of what's going to happen without knowing for sure.
Yeah, for me, that's actually the best part of this entire solo experience. Beyond the trials ladder structure, which I really like, the way the AI works is all of the normal warrior units, they have set instructions for how they're supposed to function based on which faction they're a part of. That's great. That means that part is deterministic. You can think through exactly what they're going to do. You can plan for it. And that means your decisions are pretty crunchy. But what makes a game exciting is some chance and not knowing exactly what's going to happen. This, to me, is that same kind of perfect balance between deterministic combat and luck. Like you mentioned, rolling the dice. You roll these 4 dice for your champion opponents, and those dice, if they get a hit or success, basically tells you which actions they're going to take that round. That's all simple and easy to manage. It's tailored to the map and the objectives you're dealing with for that round. And so it feels like their movements actually make sense, which AI movements do not always. And you can plan for what might happen, but you're never quite sure how they're going to react. And man, that is so good to me.
Right. And that variability, like while the other opponents are deterministic, the variability of the champion, of like how that affects your units, all this stuff, that will change those things. So it's just, you never know exactly what will happen, but it's not outlandish.
Yeah, agreed. And it just keeps all of the games feeling fresh to me. And it's just very low overhead as far as managing the AI opponents too, which is fantastic. I really hate spending more time on my opponent's turn than my own. That doesn't happen here. It's neat too that they managed to give them guidance so they respond to, for instance, the King of the Hill style objectives or the Capture the Flag style objectives. I mean, the map objectives are things that you're familiar with. If you've ever played a video game or a board game, it's pretty standard stuff. But it makes sense here and it works with the AI system.
Yeah.
I can't say enough good about how this plays. It's very simple, hex-based kind of simple, small maps. It takes up very little space on your table. Each match takes maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And so you could play multiple in a row, and it feels very satisfying to play that way if you want to do that. And in fact, I would say this has a pretty addictive quality to it.
Yes.
Once you start going. But if you just have time for 1 or 2 games and you don't have much brain space, this is a great game for that as well. It takes very little time to set up and tear down. You play a game in 10 to 15 minutes and you're done. At this stage of my life, I'm looking for a game that offers me some crunch, but also doesn't take me forever to play. And this just hits so many sweet spots for me in that regard. What is also cool about this is, as far as replayability is concerned, I think that's really high here. Because you can play through the challenges over and over again. They're going to play out differently. You can draft different units. You have a pretty big pool to pick from, even though it's not overwhelming. And this game also is highly expandable. So if you go on the Chip Theory Games website, you can buy just like a single new faction. So you can buy a Machu Picchu faction, for instance, and bring them in. And now you just have this new group that you can draft from. And that doesn't add much to the game. It doesn't add a ton of overhead. It's just a little more variety for a little bit of money.
Yeah.
That's really great. But if you really like the system and you want to expand it and just have really big battles, which this game does not really allow for,
right,
then there are two other titles in this series, Lost Cities and Rise of Rome, and this is compatible with all of that. And so if you want to have big battles, go for it. I mean, if you're really into this system, you can get about as deep into it as you really want to. To me, that's great.
And I would assume they work just as well solo, or do you?
Yeah,
do you know?
my understanding is
Okay.
they work just as well solo, and that they are also built with solo play in mind, which is fantastic. So, good multiplayer experience, I'm sure, or a great solo experience that's as expandable as you want it to be. Another thing I would say here is the most popular game from Chip Theory Games by far is Too Many Bones. And I've not played Too Many Bones. It looks fantastic. And if you're looking for more of an RPG experience that uses a cool tactical combat system, that looks like it's the way to go. But if you want a taste of what that is like, apparently the tactical combat in that game is based on Hoplomachus.
Okay.
And so if you are looking for that sort of combat experience, but in a much smaller footprint, without campaign play, without carrying things over from game to game, this sounds like it's the game for you. And the price point is much lower for this one than a game like Too Many Bones.
Right.
For me, this is not just an entry point, it's where I plan to stay. And I think I'm going to get a lot of play out of this one box.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing for me is, I mean, I think it's a good system, and I could see where the other bigger, more involved games would be fun, but this is, I don't necessarily crave that. I mean, part of what I like about this is how compact, how tight the gameplay is, how quickly it wraps up, how absolutely fast it is to set up and break down. Those are huge selling points for me personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just can't really say enough good about this game. And actually, we're to the point of our review where we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. And I think, at least for me, it's heavily weighted here toward good. Component quality, excellent.
Yes.
There's very little I would change about that. And one of my favorite things is just the amount of content in the box is manageable. It does not feel like this huge, overwhelming experience, which it seems like most games want to be nowadays.
Yeah.
And that's cool, but it can feel bloated. This feels very lean, not only in terms of component selection, but also the rules here are very tight and well honed and elegant even.
Mm-hmm.
And the structure of the solo game with the solo trials and the ladder climbing system, all that for me is outstanding.
Yeah, I think the solo play is a lot of fun. I never got to play this one multiplayer. Have you?
I have not, and I do think it would be fun.
Right.
And I think I would enjoy that. So if you think you're looking for a game that would play well either way, this would be a good choice, I think.
Right.
But for me, it's definitely worth it just for solo play.
Yeah, I would say so too. It feels just like a very fleshed out solo experience. It doesn't feel like you're losing anything from the multiplayer, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the AI system here is great. That mixture of deterministic combat versus not being quite sure of what's going to happen with the roll of the dice. I really love all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how expandable the game is. You know, for me, I plan on getting the premium health chips at some point, just because if you want to, you can get these nice, thicker health chips.
Mm-hmm.
They're already nice.
Right.
Just to make it feel a little bit nicer in your hand, I'll probably get the Machu Picchu civilization, but that's really all I need.
Yeah.
You know, and even I don't need that. I just want it. This is a very satisfying box that you really don't need anything else but this to have a great time for a long time to come.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The only things that I would consider bad for this game, we mentioned the roll of the dice, and I do really like rolling dice to see what happens with the AI opponents. There can be a problem sometimes where you will just roll really well for them over and over and you'll just get stomped. Or you could roll very poorly for them and you just sail to victory. I've had that happen once or twice. It's pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, just odds being what they are, it does balance out pretty well. But that can happen.
Yeah.
So that's just an element of this that anytime you use dice in a game like this, it can go that way.
It stays off being listed under bad for me just on how quick the games feel.
Yeah, that's
personally.
true.
I mean, either if it's like a landslide or getting stomped. I don't know. It's fast enough that I was like, well, that wasn't super satisfying. But then the next experience will probably be fine.
Yeah, that's true. And if you're talking about a game that's 10 to 15 minutes long, it's not really that big a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just going to list it here just because it is something that can happen. The only other thing that I would list in the bad category, and I consider putting this in ugly, but it's really not, is just the lack of clarity in some of the rules for me.
Yeah.
It's a small deal, but I wish there was a more easily accessible FAQ or that sort of thing. I had to go searching on the BGG forums to find the answer to that heave question.
Yeah.
That should have been in the rulebook. But for me, that's the only negative thing I have to say about this game.
Yeah, that's all I can really think of. Just a little bit more clarity on the rules. But I mean, that seems nitpicky.
Yeah. I've had this for a few years now and have played it many, many times. I love this game. It's widely considered, I think, at this point to be a solo classic. And that's mostly because of Ricky Royal and his channel. He seemed to be the guy who first championed this title. And I was unsure for a long time because the cover is a little bit bland.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the sort of thing that sucks you in. Actually, on the cover, there's two guys fighting in an arena pit, and the arena pit has hexes on it. That doesn't draw me in exactly.
An empty arena also.
Yeah, an empty arena. There's nobody around, just two guys fighting for reasons. But I've got to tell you, I was wrong. This is an absolutely stellar game. Small footprint, great components, plays quickly, crunchy decisions. I mean, it's just, for me, this is the total package of what I'm looking for in a solo game. I love this game, absolutely. And I would say that it is a game that works even if you only ever play it solo.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this is going to be a game that gets the stamp of approval from us. We don't give these things out lightly, as you've probably been able to tell if you listened to this show for a while. But this game is just absolutely fantastic in so many ways, and really a game that I think is going to work for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. I could come back to it. I mean, I think the gameplay is really tight. How quickly it is to get it out and play, I don't know. Those things are all real important to me with playing solo, and so it just works so well for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very pleased to give Hoplomachus Origins the stamp of approval, and that's all we've got for you for this episode. If you haven't yet checked out the Dice Tower Network, which is the network that we are a part of, you should go to dicetower.com and see what other shows are out there that talk about board games that might be a good fit for you. There are plenty of them that cover board games from all different angles, so check those out on dicetower.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you want to keep up with what we're playing and what games we've just gotten in. It's a good place to have conversation as well. You can find us, follow our page there, or follow our account on Instagram. If you haven't yet, please give us a review on iTunes. That helps us to promote the show and helps other people to find the show. It seems like a small thing, but it's something that really does help us out. So go on there and check us out. And if you are interested in getting a Solosaurus micro badge on Board Game Geek, we have those, and they're free to you. All you have to do is send me a message, let me know that you're interested in one, and I will send you the 8 Geek Gold that it takes to get one. We have had so many people take us up on this. Like every time I mention it on one of these episodes, we get another 4 or 5 requests, and that is awesome. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in getting one of these for yourself. Until next time, though, my name is Brandon Waite.
My name is Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.